And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Welcome back, everybody, on a holy moly Wednesday edition here. The owners' meeting's going on, leading you to the draft. The Eagles have been very busy in free agency, taking a look at it all now. Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com is in the house on this Wednesday edition, filling in for Moshe today. What's going on, AD?
Hey, Mike, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
All is well, and I know as the calendar is about to flip over to April, we start to focus on the draft a little bit. We'll dive into that. I know you're doing a lot of draft coverage right now over at InsideTheBirds.com, but want to get your thoughts on the second little wave of free agency with the Eagles bringing in Paris Campbell, another linebacker. It seems that there's just some more little things that this team did in this little second wave of free agency.
Yeah, well, that was to be expected. That's kind of how things go with the Eagles and a lot of teams. Free agency isn't just the first day or two. It goes all the way through really training camp, as the Eagles have proven. So, look, last season you saw them go after guys like Alameda Zacchaeus and Contavious Street in the second wave. This time you're seeing the Oren Burks, the Paris Campbell, and players of that mold. And what they're really doing, Mike, is they're draft-proofing their roster going into the draft. So you really go into it without having any immediate needs that maybe it sort of alleviates the potential of reaching for a player in a position of need. So I like what they've done. I just have some questions as to how viable of a solution someone like a Paris Campbell is going to be at this stage of his career.
Yeah, I know that wasn't Paris Campbell the guy that there was reports that they wanted to take. They ended up taking J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Was that the same draft?
Yes, it was back in 2019, believe it or not.
Campbell's been all right. I mean, he's had some injury problems, hasn't done much recently. We'll see, but you're right. That third wide receiver spot. And by the way, speaking of third wide receiver, Quez Watkins has signed with, Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah, and he's far from a lock to make the team, but he kind of reminds me of that Deontay Johnson type of speed player, although he's nowhere near the route runner that Johnson is. So he's going to have to fight to make the roster, but, all the best to Quez.
All right. It's draft season for Andrew. I know you're doing a lot of the pro days. Got the Temple Pro Day, Rutgers Pro Day today, and a lot of stuff. Your mock draft 3.0 Eagles version is up over at InsideTheBirds.com. Thought some interesting things were over there. Nate Wiggins, the Clemson corner. So you've taken a couple different turns in this spot at number 22. Is this your thoughts on because of free agency, what they've done, getting more information on the players? How'd you come up with Wiggins this time around?
Well, I like Fatanu from Washington, but he's had such a tremendous pre-draft cycle that it's tough to envision him being there at 22. You never want to speak in absolutes, but the way things are trending right now, it's looking to be that. And you never want to take a pure guard in the first round, so me just rationalizing this in my head, corner is really the position that they haven't significantly upgraded in free agency. You take a step back and assess the roster and where the value is going to be at that particular position, and it's by all accounts going to be corner, whether it be Nate Wiggins, who would be at the top of my board in that spot, or Kool-Aid McKinstry perhaps, Cooper DeJean. I don't know if he's going to be there at that particular time, but those are the players you're looking at. And I don't know that you want to go a pure tackle there at 22 and then essentially redshirt him this year. So I went with Nate Wiggins, the corner. He's got some length to him. He's going to be a plug-and-play outside guy. You worry about his weight and physicality and ability to kind of withstand the rigors of the pro level. But I've seen enough on tape to really be convinced that he's a guy that's going to be a long-term starter and a productive starter in this league. And he would essentially be fulfilling a role on the outside opposite Darius Slay. Look, the Eagles don't really have a lot of corners that you can count on going into the season. You can look at Keely Ringo, you can look at Eli Ricks, you can look at Bradbury bouncing back, but those are all projections, right? You got to go with, you can ill afford to do that. They did that last offseason with the Kobe Dean. I think right now you have to go for someone who is going to be more of a slam dunk, and in this case it would be a first-round prospect at the position.
All right, so let's look at that position. Because you take Wiggins a corner in the first round. Is he a guy, you said plug and play. How does that affect maybe a James Bradbury and that corner situation if they went with a first-round corner that could get on the field right away?
Well, Bradbury to me would still provide value. Now, he would be an expensive depth player. I understand that, but I do think that he could have some value, and he can also teach the young player the ropes along with Darius Slay. But Bradbury, and I've said this many times before since the season's ended, I view him as someone that has a skill set with the length and the football intelligence and things of that nature, that he can be a effective player as a situational guy, someone who can guard tight ends. There's a lot of those explosive move tight ends. He's better in confined spaces versus being out there on an island where his short area quickness is severely lacking. His long speed has long been lagging, and I think that doesn't necessarily accentuate what he does really well at this stage of his career. So I think that he can be a situational player and provide some value to this defense.
Andrew DiCecco, football at 4. Interesting. Cooper Beebe, offensive guard, and I bring him up. You have him as your second-round pick, and I wonder, because last year the Eagles took Nolan Smith, a second first-rounder. He didn't get on the field all that much, did make a big impact. If you have Wiggins at 22 and then took an offensive guard like Beebe, would he be a guy that you could see getting plugged into right guard immediately?
Yeah, definitely. And look, when you assess the roster right now, right guard is arguably the one position that there is a lot of trepidation, a lot of unknown. You don't know what Tyler Steen is going to be able to do. He played in one game last year, and it was not very good, to be frank with you. Yes, he was playing a new position. I understand that, but you can't go into it thinking, yeah, Tyler Steen, we can pencil him in. He's going to develop, and he's going to be the player that we thought he was going to be when we drafted him. That would be malpractice. If you have a chance to take a player like a Cooper Beebe, who is a plug-and-play guy, who does have he's pro-ready by most accounts, you do it. You don't second-guess it. You don't just bank on the fact that you have Tyler Steen and maybe he pans out. Cam Jurgens, I think, is going to be fine at center, but you have to figure out that right guard spot. And to me, at pick number 50, that seems to be a spot where the Eagles have taken offensive linemen in the past, whether it be Jurgens, whether it be Landon Dickerson. You can kind of look down the line there. So I think that would be a target area for someone, maybe like a BB. I don't envision them taking a guard, and it's really malpractice to take a pure guard in the first round. But in the second round, that's a lot different. I think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then the other second-round pick that they have, you went tight end with Jatavion Sanders from Texas, which is interesting because, the Eagles have had a history of taking tight ends in the second round. They took Ertz when they had Selleck. They took Goddard when they had Ertz. And you think they might take another guy now that Goddard's about to turn 30. He's had some injury issues.
Yeah, I like Jatavion Sanders, and he's a explosive player. He can be a vertical slot, dynamic after the catch, good catch radius. Not exactly the best blocker, but he does have the tools to become a capable blocker. I don't know that he'll ever be at the level of someone like a Dallas Goedert is right now, or a Jack Stoll for that matter, but he can certainly do it. And he's just another dynamic weapon that you can add offensively. He's good at contested catches, which would help someone like Jalen Hurts when he's operating in the middle of the field to have that confidence to fit it into a tight window. I think there's a lot of value there. And instead of maybe forcing a receiver, you're still getting a pass catcher, though it would be a tight end, and you're also looking towards the future because Goddard's actually going to be 30, believe it or not, by the time January rolls around. So it wouldn't be surprising to me, given the Eagles and their forward thinking, that they sort of look to expedite the process and have a contingency plan in place.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy to think about. That Goddard, I think, is what's going to be his 6th or 7th season coming up here for the Eagles after he was drafted kind of surprisingly in that second round when they already had Ertz. So the Eagles seemingly like to do that. So I'll ask you, I'm sure you've seen Mike Tannenbaum's GM mock draft. What would you think about Brock Bowers in the first round at number 22? This is kind of like the Kyle Pitts thing a couple of years ago. Like, hey, do you take a tight end that high? You're at 22 this time. Is that a guy that would intrigue you if they ended up taking him there?
Certainly. And at 22, he would definitively be the best player on the board. However, I don't view him tumbling that far. But if he does, I would think the Eagles would sprint to the podium to grab somebody of that caliber. Another game-changing pass catcher to add to a explosive offense. That would be a no-brainer for me.
Wow. All right. So you would be okay with that?
Yeah, he's the best player on the board. You're not reaching. You need a tight end, and he would be. It would be very unforeseen for him to be sitting there at that time. You have to pounce when you have the opportunity.
Right. Okay. So you said you need a tight end. It's not more that you think. Well, do you think Goddard is slowing down now?
Not necessarily slowing down, but you do have to be mindful of the injuries. You have to be mindful of the age.
Right.
And the Eagles are a team that likes to have as many weapons as possible. And I think that operating the middle of the field, it gives Jalen Hurts another safety valve, security blanket, red zone option to help in that area. And the Eagles could have an early jump on addressing the position and be able to develop them for a year under Goddard, let's say. I don't want to write Goddard off or anything like that. I'm just saying that the Eagles, they really haven't had a good number 2 tight end for a while they could rely upon. And that's a glaring issue considering Goddard has missed significant time over the past couple of seasons. So I think having somebody like that can step in and eventually overtake Goddard would be prudent and would be prudent to address in this draft when you have the opportunity.
I agree. I'm intrigued. When I saw it, I was like, now that's kind of interesting. Never really crossed my mind until I saw that yesterday. I was like, now that would be pretty interesting if he fell to 22 and they actually took him. Because as Nick Sirianni talked about yesterday, hey, we got to see what we got here. He was talking about Saquon Barkley and how they envisioned to kind of fit him in. He was like, it's kind of like A.J. Brown. We got to see what we got here. But if you had Barkley, A.J. Brown, Smith, Goddard, and then threw a guy like Bowers out there, I guess the question would be, what kind of identity would you want to see from an offense as built currently, and then if you had a second tight end like that to the mix?
Well, that's a fast break offense. You expect to see a lot of points, and you expect to see Jalen Hurts take the next step in his evolution as a quarterback because you have a plethora of weapons and of all different shapes and sizes and skill sets. And, I mean, obviously there's only one football, so you have to be mindful of the target share there. But, I mean, that would be about as loaded of a passing attack as one could even imagine. So I would think that, everything this offseason has been, how can we get our franchise quarterback back to the level of play in 2022? Well, surrounding him with top-end talent across the board would certainly be a step in that direction.
Yeah, it would. It would be interesting to get that out there. But it's going to be interesting, as we know, on how they're going to kind of share the share the ball between Barkley and Brown and Smith. But what more will the identity be? Is this going to be a run-first team? Is this going to be a pass team? Is this going to be a balanced offense? That's going to be something that will be interesting to find out as this thing. Because yesterday it didn't seem that Nick Sirianni really had an answer to that question yet. Hey, I want to see what this team looks like. We haven't even stepped on the field yet. But you would have to think in his mind they have a way in their head that they want to use Saquon Barkley. So we'll see how that all unfolds. We're talking with Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. Here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. He is covering the pro days, some local pro days this week here, Andrew. And so give us some insight on some of the local flavor that the listeners can look for maybe on draft day.
So I was at Temple's Pro Day on Monday. The main event was linebacker Jordan McGee, who ran a 4.5 at the NFL Scouting Combine. Tested really well there overall. Really athletic, fluid linebacker, about 6'1", 232. And he only did the cone drill. He did the shuttle. He did the 3-cone. And he also did linebacker position work on Monday at the request of Eagles linebackers coach Bobby King. He's someone that's going to be a day 3 pick, and he's garnered a lot of interest from Cowboys, the Texans, the Broncos, and he has a bunch of pro days on the slide. The Eagles brought him in for a private workout last week, so there's obviously interest there. He's right in their backyard. He's going to be a player that continues to rise as we get through this process here. And then there was a couple local prospects in that pro day that really caught my eye. One of them being Kyle Sheets, the wide receiver from Slippery Rock, 6'4", 220, good catch radius, high points to football, good hands catcher, ran like a 4.5, I believe. But more notably even was running back Chris Collier from Lock Haven University, where I spent some time back in the day, and he ran a 4.4, jumped at 37, had a 10.9 broad, and I think 21 reps on the bench. Really was like the standout of the day outside of Jordan McGee, and there was a lot of scouts talking to him after. He has a lot of pro days lined up now. I mean, this is a Division II running back, so I thought he really helped himself there. And you never know who's going to maximize their opportunities in a pro day situation, and I thought he did that.
All right, we know Rutgers as well up the road there has some local flavor here too. And Max Melton was a guy who really stood out at the combine. His draft stock is kind of shot up the boards after he ran there. So what are you seeing up there?
Oh, yeah, Max Melton, who is a player that's going to be a second or third round pick in the draft, can play inside or outside. I view him more as a nickel player initially. Fluid, explosive. He did a lot of good things at the combine, so I'm not sure what exactly he's going to be testing tomorrow. Maybe position work at the request of certain coaches, maybe some cone drills. We'll have to see, but I'll be reporting it all on Twitter and on InsideTheBirds.com. They also have a linebacker named Deion Jennings who will be at the Eagles local day, as I understand it, on April 17th. So he's a player that I'll also be keeping an eye on because he has generated some interest, and I want to see how he's able to do when he has a lot of eyes on him and if he's able to seize the moment.
All right, the pro days all here. That's the next step in the draft process. And, of course, you can hear the draft on 97.3 ESPN. And we'll have a little news on our NFL Eagles draft party coming up here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com. Check out all his stuff over there. And, of course, here on the Sports Bash. All right, Andrew, thanks, buddy.
You bet. Take care.